thank you. I said thank you so much for your time. So I could just start then. I'm sure that kind of each day for you is different, but could you just kind of maybe talk us through some of your kind of roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. In general, my my charge is to build the strategy and execution plan for our heavy construction business within Hexagon for North America. So it's really around looking at how the different products and solutions that we have fit the market, what distribution methods and channels work the best to get them into the hands of end users, and not just about selling it to them, but then what's going to be the best mechanism to support that product. As you know, with construction technology, there's an adoption curve around learning, around cost. There's all of these things that have to be taken into consideration. So really, it's pretty exciting job in all, and the most important part is really developing the team of people that wind up ultimately delivering that to the market.
Okay, great, thanks. So you mentioned that you're kind of looking after North America.
Yes.
I kind of wonder, kind of, how has the obviously it's different for kind of different contractors and maybe different size contractors, but how would you say the kind of the take up of construction technology has been in North America?
I think it's continued to be a steady increase. I think that will continue to maybe even accelerate, right? Because now what you're seeing is maybe some contractor consolidations, or some of the new startups of construction companies are then derivatives of larger firms that have already been using some construction technology. So
Yeah.
It's getting very much more mainstream than it was, say, 10 years ago. But I think it's important to point out that there's still a large amount of the industry that is still untapped. And even within the contractors that are using construction technology, there's a pretty vast amount of technology that hasn't been deployed yet on their site. So they're using technologies that they're used to and comfortable with, like machine control, but there are a lot of other technologies that are maybe not quite in play yet. So even within those contractors that have adopted, there are many more types of technology to introduce to them.
Okay. Could you give us an example of a couple of those different types of technologies?
Yeah, sure. A couple that kind of come to mind are like ground penetrating radar solutions. So now when you can go actually do a mapping of the utilities that are under the ground, you can build avoidance zones around those so that your operator doesn't inadvertently strike a gas line or a water line. And so that's a big one that is now starting to really catch on with contractors. Another one is just the use of laser scanning, and how that allows you to, instead of collecting a few points of data, collect millions and millions of points of data, and a lot of times be able to do that in such a way that you can compare large surfaces, whether they're vertical, whether they're horizontal, over a period of time very quickly, to see if your what changes occurred. You can check for safety things. So I think that's a big one. And then the last one, Andy, I would probably mention is just this whole concept of safety-driven solutions. So what are we doing to keep people and assets safe on a project? It's long been known that there's a shortage of skilled operators in the industry, and so how do we just protect people so that we can keep the ones that are in the industry in it longer? How do we keep jobs moving cleaner? And use all of our resources, whether they're people resources, natural resources, the most efficiently.
Absolutely. So, as sort of you talked there about the sort of at the start about that kind of adoption curve, which is, what do you think we can do in terms of kind of, are there kind of things that we can be doing in the industry that we're not in order to kind of help that adoption curve come along, and to kind of maybe to try to push it out to kind of more of the smaller and the medium sized players?
I do. I think what we're going to see a trend on the market is really going from single sensor solutions to multi-sensor solutions, which is really the key, because one sensor does this one task and it helps you do that more efficiently, and that's great. But it's when we start to link all those together, and I think about 30, 40 years ago, I would ride around in the car with my folks, and they had a speedometer that was a sensor that told them how fast they were going, and they had a map, right, which told them where they potentially could go. But how much easier is it now, where I can turn on Waze or Google Maps and it'll tell me my speed, it'll tell me the fastest route, and it'll suggest a restaurant on the way there, right? It's taking these multiple sensors, blending those together. And I think as that happens, the small and medium-sized contractor are able to get more benefit out of that, because then they're able to kind of customize the solution for their need. Because a lot of the smaller contractors might be a little more specialized, at least at first, right? They start maybe their business around putting in septic drain fields, something like this. But then as they grow and expand, they get an opportunity to do other things. Giving them the ability to scale their business is going to be very important.
I wonder as well, do you kind of find, in terms of the people that you're dealing with, I think I want to be careful to not generalize too much, because you can have some people that are of an older generation that are kind of very, very in tune with technology and know that everything that's kind of coming along. But do you think as well, in terms of maybe as that kind of next generation comes into construction, is this going to help the adoption of technology? Because obviously these people have grown up with technology, they've grown up with smartphones. It's just part of everyday life.
I do, to some degree. I think that will help. I think it's interesting, Andy, today, what we see with the operators that have been in the industry for a longer time, they maybe have a little more resistance to it up front. But really, once they get an opportunity to see what some solutions like machine control can do to augment what they're doing, they usually grab onto it pretty strong, because there's a lot that an operator is doing besides just moving his bucket or moving his blade, right? He's planning his next bit of work. He's looking for what the other adjacent, tasks that are being done around him are, and how they could maybe do that more efficiently. So it actually frees up some time for them to do more planning. So I do, but it has been kind of fun watching the older generation of operator glom onto it and really grab hold and take it up.
Absolutely. So we kind of know that productivity has obviously been an issue for kind of construction for a while. Just kind of how big a help can kind of construction tech be, and kind of how much of a game changer could tech be in terms of helping the industry to become more productive?
Wow, the kind of the sky's the limit, so to speak. I mean, at the end of the day, as a contractor, which I was for a number of years, you're managing four things, right? Your equipment, your labor, your materials, and your subcontractors, and how you optimize the use of that. And I don't have overrun in materials. Well, you could start at the beginning of the technology curve and just talk about how do I do a proper takeoff, to make sure that when I'm putting together my bid, number one, I'm competitive, but number two, then I've set that baseline for how much materials I should be using. And then as you go into the construction phase and you're using these different technologies, you're able to quickly see, kind of your burn rate, if you will. Am I using more materials? Am I using more labor and man hours and equipment hours than I thought? So it gives you a little more of a near real time decision point that you can take to change something before it becomes a pattern and you realize weeks later that I've been hemorrhaging money for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And my next project cost report comes out and I'm panicking. No, I've uncovered that evening maybe that something did not go the way I planned it that day. So I think that's a lot of how we can help productivity, is tighten up that decision-making cycle considerably. And that's really exciting. And then the other thing we can do is, with the ability to now not only create a finished as-built of a project, but to create like a time-layered as-built of a project are very interesting as well. So we can not only discover how much productivity was achieved in a given period of time, but almost give us some qualitative measurements, right? So if we're building say a tieback wall, what does the batter of that wall look like? Is it exactly to plan? Did it shift over time? So even some after the project is done, some of the operations and maintenance of the asset, you have some really pretty rich data to go back and compare the construction phase with the maintenance and operations phase of it. I think that's very exciting and will pay a lot of dividends for us in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you. So a lot of the things that you were talking about there is obviously all about data. I kind of wonder how big an issue is it at the moment that that not all of the data from kind of different OEMs and different tech companies kind of speak to each other, and is this something that you see kind of potentially improving in the future?
Well, I think it needs to. I think that's the challenge, is that it really needs to improve, Andy. My philosophy is really pretty simple, that data is really not the end game here. Information is. So we could scan this entire room that I'm sitting in, and we could collect millions upon millions of points of data about it. But the important part is that if, say, I ordered a new desk, I really just wanted to know how wide the door opening was. So the data itself, the size, the big data, it's great to have that. But really, I think all of the tools, all of the players in the industry and the OEMs have to start thinking about really not the data, but the information that the contractor needs to extract, and making that accessible, and that you can run a very quick query of whatever it is you're looking for, the width of the door, the elevation of said spot on a project site. That's where I think the focus has to be, and making that really accessible.
Because there's obviously such a thing as too much data as well, isn't there? And you kind of feel like sometimes if there's so much data, then people might not even look at it because it's sort of a bit overwhelming. So as you say, I guess there's that real skill and a real need for there to be the right information available for the contractors.
Right. But I think it's an exciting time though around data, because we're able to now get information as contractors that really wasn't available ever before, right? We can now start to have information about predictive failures in how the machine's operating, hydraulic systems and engine systems. that's exciting. We can now measure, is operator A more productive than operator B when doing a similar task? Those are things that for the years we've speculated about, we've tried to kind of watch for, but there wasn't a lot of concrete evidence around that. Now we live in that time where we're starting to collect that information and look at it. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see where we take it as an industry over the next 10 years.
So I know you don't have a glass ball in front of you, but kind of where do you think where do you think the industry might take it in 10 years' time, or kind of where would you like to see it go?
I would like to, in an ideal world, Andy, I would like to see, data formats that, contractors don't need 25 different softwares to run. At the end of the day, they need to be able to focus on their operations, planning their work, executing it, keeping their folks safe. And so right now, if you look at these systems where you're looking at machine health, or you're looking at progress data from a project, it's requiring multiple platforms, if you will. And one of the reasons that we have always maintained an open architecture strategy is really allowing the contractor to be able to pull our data in and out of different platforms that they use. And so I think that's really key. If you need 5 people on your staff just to administrate your data for a medium-sized contractor, you may have a data problem, right? Yeah. We need to be able to let that flow. So I think removing some of the obstacles of how information flows is really going to be the thing that we need to improve on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So one of the other areas I wanted to touch on was kind of semi-automation, and just to kind of get your views on kind of how big a role this can play in kind of increasing productivity and safety, which is obviously one of the things that we've already touched on, and also kind of maybe to get your views on kind of where this might go in the future.
Sure. So, semi-automation, we've kind of had this in the form of machine control for a number of years. And I kind of go back to what I said earlier around, you take a really good operator and you give him semi-automation where you're removing some of the human error factor, or the sun's glaring in my eyes and I can't see my hubs and these kind of things. You start to remove that, and instead you give them the ability to plan their work better, plan for efficiency. So I think, we see a lot of benefits in that, from reduced time to do the work, reduced time that we don't like to admit that sometimes has to be used for rework. That's both for the machine and the person. We see a decrease in materials consumption. So whether it's pipe or it's crushed stone, these kind of things, we see that we manage those resources a lot better. And then you also, you mentioned safety. So just within the kind of the context of semi-automation, when you have that that automation happening, you need fewer people that are specifically working tightly with the machine. The people that are generally more in harm's way, so to speak, and because they don't need to validate every 30 feet or 50 feet or whatnot, because the machine's doing that. So we can kind of keep them out of harm's way and keep them working on other tasks that are important to the project as well. But I think also, Andy, when you start to combine some of the safety solutions with the automation, where the sensors are actually alerting the operator to where the other people and assets on the project are, if they're on a collision path with them, that'll also, combining those technologies is really key, I think, to getting the most out of the automation.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of kind of looking to the future, kind of how much is it science fiction to kind of imagine that there will be, completely kind of autonomous machines? And obviously, I know it depends on, something like mining or something like that, something where it's a bit more closed, there's kind of less kind of moving parts, people are there for a while. I know that's a bit different. So I know it kind of varies from kind of job site to job site, but just in terms of the technology itself, kind of, do you think that there will come a time where kind of that is feasible?
I think that, yes, the technology, it is feasible to do that. I think what's interesting is where we see it, like in the mining field, for example. I think about that. It's not manufacturing, but it's a similar process that's happening over and over. And the construction site is highly dynamic. So we might be working on one task, but there's a very sudden change, and now there's a need for us to work on a totally different task.
Yeah.
And weather changes, someone didn't show up for work, the pipe didn't show up. So we make these constant shifts. So I think what we may see is specific pieces of a project become more autonomous. But I think we're probably a ways before we see a fully autonomous site, just because of the variability. Now, I say that, and if the project is something fairly repetitive, we're working in a landfill situation or something like that, yes, I can see those things being automated more quickly. But a dynamic residential commercial development site, that's going to probably be a little further down the road, but not because of the technology, but because of the kind of the decision making that needs to be made in real time on a project.
Yes, no, thank you. That makes sense. As you say, there's so many kind of different external factors, and there's so many different things, isn't there, going on at a construction site at once. Okay, great. Thank you. My final question really is, I'm just kind of curious to know what kind of is there one particular aspect of construction technology that kind of excites you more than all the others? Kind of what are you kind of really excited about when it comes to kind of construction tech? And that might just be it doesn't have to be the thing that might have, it might be the thing that could potentially have the biggest impact on productivity, or it could just be something you think is cool.
I'm actually really excited about reality capture. I think we're on the just the very forefront of that becoming commonplace in heavy construction, and it'll take us some time to figure out, like, what are the most beneficial workflows and things that people want to use with that. But again, if we're able to query the information that we need out of the data, and you just look at the kind of the richness and the robustness of data sets that you can get from reality capture, it's pretty mind-blowing. And so as you think about that and having kind of ongoing collection of the evolution of the site, so now you're able to almost go back and recreate on a timeline how a project comes together. Do some analysis of did we do that right? Did we do that wrong? How well did we do it? I think that's going to be the one that kind of in the buckets of technology that's going to be the most exciting over the next 5, 7, maybe even 10 years, is watching how that kind of just emerges into kind of the everyday work stream of a contractor.
Great, thank you. Yes, I was going to say, so you think this will become a bit more mainstream than it is now, perhaps?
I believe it will, yes.
Okay, Perfect. Well, Troy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.